people recognizing that they are walking data, right? To your point,
Yes.
and having to think about what that truly means. We've abdicated so much of it because we want the convenience and the leisure of the things we like. We want to be on Instagram and TikTok, and there's an implicit statement to some extent, maybe explicit, that I'm going to give you this data in order for me to get to watch the cat meme, right? Fine. And so, but the more and more that happens, the more dangerous it is unless you recognize what your data is worth.
The greatest migration is underway, and it is transforming every facet of our lives and our economies, and we get to be a part of it. This generational shift unlocks the power of millions to transform our economies from the bottom up. Join us as we talk with and listen to the stories of entrepreneurs and leaders who are on the front lines of that change. It's the kind of change that matters. My name is Alpha Demelash. I'm the CEO and co-founder of Rising Tide Capital, and for the past 21 years, we've been transforming lives and communities through entrepreneurship.
Welcome back to Future Tide Conversations. We're continuing the conversation with James Johnson-Piett, Principal and CEO of Urbane Development and Chair of Mangrove LLC, in part 2 of this special 2-part episode. If you haven't heard part 1 yet, we recommend starting there to learn about James's background and the origins of his mission. In this episode, we'll delve further into James's work and the ideas of the rapidly emerging future, exploring how he is expanding his impact and the innovation tools he's developing to bring capital and opportunity into new communities. Together with host Alpha Demelash, James discusses the broader implications of data ownership and his approach to innovation and his vision for the future of inclusive economic development.
When it comes to communities, real estate, and I'm assuming real estate will always be with us. We still need places to live and all the reasons why real estate is important. And then there's technology and what that looks like. And then the agency question, and like how are people, how are our communities, how are we actually exercising our sense of creativity and agency if this is to be a positive future? What are you up to?
That's a big question, Alpha. All right, so I think the crescendos are interesting. I mean, I think it's like multiple crescendos. Like you think about like a fireworks, 4th of July fireworks display. You have like these sort of like this crescendo moment where there's lots of different fireworks happening at the same time.
Yeah.
I think it's happening the same way with our sort of social economy and technology and frankly even real estate right now. You're having all these sort of parallel sort of shifts in the norm that are all happening right now. So I think for us, going back to the idea of community anchorage, right? Like the one currency that's traditional and the one currency that will always be important, and particularly in the age of AI, is trust, right?
Yeah.
Like if you don't trust the media source, if you don't trust the source of truth, everything else is sort of the fruit of the poison tree, so to speak.
Yes.
It just imbues in everything else. And so for me, at least at the neighborhood level, when I think about neighborhood as a unit of change, having those actors and having those spaces that are trusted, if in my mind, the idea is when you invest in them, you're investing not just like capital or real estate or some sort of asset that we kind of think about from that perspective, but it is investing into that truth so they can be the evangelists of a consistent truth, right? If we can knowledge and level them up, like they can be the on-ramps to this knowledge base. So we were talking about earlier, like the idea of data and community. Like it's all anecdotal, obviously, but like my experience with community is there's a lot of awareness around technology generally. There's a lot of awareness around the idea of AI. A lack of knowledge around what it is, what it could do, how does it sort of imbue them into, to your point, like how does someone's life change because of it, right? At best, all they hear about is like, again, the grand automation of their job, right? They understand that part of it, but they don't understand all the other implications that are happening across the board. Like I mentioned before around the fully automated luxury communism book, what's interesting about what you mentioned around real estate is if you create a structure where labor is not needed in the same way anymore, right? The factory or the surface space, places become different too, right? What land is worth and what a building is worth, the value change because what we need it for changes, right? Yeah. So reimagining physical space in the context of that new economy could be very scary, like a robot's gonna take my job, or it could be really, uplifting and frankly revolutionary in a good way. Like how do I convene in a post automated economy where I have agency over both the economics part of it, but also the leisure and the recreational or anything else. I can reimagine space in that new construct where I'm not scarce anymore. And so all those, it's one of the things where like all those realities could happen. We're getting super movie now. It could be very, very multiversal, right? Like there's a universe where the bad version happens, a universe where the good version happens. And so like every quantum, every decision we make creates a new sort of pathway point around what we're looking at.
Yeah.
And I think the moment we're in right now is how do we make sure people have enough information and enough agency, like you mentioned earlier, to make good choices, to coalesce and collectively sort of like, I think, build a power base that can sort of speak to something at scale and say, this is what I want my AI to look like. This is how I'm going to influence what AI is going to be, because it's going to be naturally, hopefully, part of my life a little bit more. And so we think about what Urbane and the Mangrove is really pushing now. It is in my lifetimes, the first mile of that infrastructure. So AI has to start showing up in neighborhoods, and right now it's not there yet. And so it shows up a little bit in my job or a little bit on my phone because I'm using ChatGPT or something like that. But where does it become truly part of infrastructure? That race is the race that I'm trying to run, at least in my little corner of the world. How do I get it into people's hands in all the different ways it needs to be in their hands quickly enough so they can first get over the fear of it, understand what the power of it can be. But more importantly, as we're thinking, create the entrepreneurial pathways for where like, how are you going to start having businesses and enterprises and workers and the folks who are dreaming up the next things, especially the kids? How's their stuff showing up in place so that we could test this stuff out and figure out like whether you want to talk about the market or whether to talk about the community or however you want to spin it, we got to start using it in a way that's much more robust and sort of longitudinal than what we're doing right now. And so a big part of what we're talking about at the Mangrove on the entrepreneurial nonprofit side of things is, okay, how do you become tech enabled? So if you're a legacy business, you're doing health and beauty care, you're doing food, you're doing something like that, technology enablement is a critical sort of move, especially right now in the moment we're in. We're post-COVID, people's habits have changed, like I said. People are moving through space differently. The natural footfall that you sort of expect when you have a restaurant, you have some sort of place-based business, it can't not be the only way you make money. At the same time, how you deal with people changes as well, because if you're not getting as many people coming through your doors every day, how you interact with them, how you sort of connect with them, how you build community with them, all changes. And in thinking about where you can frankly automate for some good, to be able to reach people and to connect and do those things. Like the entry opportunity point is a sort of nexus where entrepreneurs are going to create the next use cases for how tech enablation sort of works within AI, and having the technologists who are at the cutting and bleeding edge of these technologies building products and services for that group. Because I think the disconnect that I'm running into right now is everybody who has the capabilities of really being the architects and the engineers of AI are all thinking about building stuff that's like, it's not, all right, it's not for the folks that we're talking about. They're not building these tools for these communities. And until we can get those folks who are at the cutting and bleeding edge of the space to think about these communities, both from a market perspective, there are markets not being served, and a community perspective, hey, what future do I want to build for my kids? And do I want to create a product that's going to be destructive or constructive for them? That synergy is what I'm trying to create a sort of platform for.
Okay, so I'm following, and I want to introduce something that's been kind of nagging at me around this particular thing. Because similar to, and I had a lovely interview with one of our entrepreneurs who has worked in property maintenance and used to be a property manager. And so she'd said something along the lines of like, property maintenance requires you to, often gives you actually access to all kinds of information that most people don't know, wouldn't know, what's happening in the home, what's going on with, all kinds of dynamics. There's lots of information and data that comes from the intimacy of just being the property maintenance folks that are getting called when something is happening in a building. Similarly, I feel like when we're using platforms like ChatGPT and other tech-enabled or tech, there are property maintenance guys, right? That see what the community is doing. Like when I think about you and the work that you're doing and what you did with the Caribbean market, which I really also want to make sure we get in there. And I think about like, well, what are those Caribbean entrepreneurs? We have a certain picture of them in our minds and even a certain experience in community and more collectivist environments with them and what they tell us. And then there's like the things that they do on their phone. And there are things that are happening that we don't have access to, but somebody else has access to. Somebody knows what they're asking about, what they're concerned about, what they trust and don't trust. And so how do we not just operate off of our perspective of what we see when we walk into a room with a certain community or a certain culture, and go off of our assumptions based on experience, our trust based on experience, and yet there is this new mediator that's playing, and it reaches us individually and in really intimate ways. But it doesn't mean that it's not like you going and praying to God and you're in a house of worship. I have no idea what your relationship there is, but with this technology, there is a mediator. There is a Sam Altman. There is, and so how do you hold that? I know this is
because I think there's two things happening in my head. So one is like, again, no shade to Sam Altman, but like, all right, like if I think of it like like the browser wars, like you can be a Chrome guy or Edge guy, and then there's Firefox, right? Or variants thereof. You can say, okay, you know what? I'm going to opt to this third lane. The question is, can the third lane be wide enough and big enough to sort of compete really with the Leviathans that we're talking about on the other side of it? I think AI is going to be in that same space, where OpenAI is sort of showing up, and so are they going to be the 10,000-pound gorilla? You obviously have all the legacy tech companies who are trying to catch up in that same space. You got my man Musk, so all these incumbents are doing what they're doing, and so and maybe because there's a lot of incumbents doing what they're doing, there could be I hope there is the ascendance of a new player who doesn't exist yet, or has the opportunity to exist because people are freaked out by the old players. They're like, I don't want to give you my data. I don't want to think about this. And there may be not maybe a third option, like a ninth option, right? And I say this, and because of going back to the point I was making earlier, the agency of people recognizing that they are walking data, right? To your point, and having to think about what that truly means. We've abdicated so much of it because we want the convenience and the leisure of the things we like. We want to be on Instagram and TikTok, and there's an implicit statement to some extent, maybe explicit, that I'm going to give you this data in order for me to watch the cat meme, right? Fine. And so, but the more and more that happens, the more dangerous it is unless you recognize what your data is worth. And that discussion point, I think, starts with someone you trust talking to you about it, because otherwise you either learn it from two places. You're either going to learn it the hard way because someone takes advantage of you and takes the thing you want, or you learn it right now, which is, I joke about this, but like our education system is really Instagram and TikTok doom scrolling and telling us what we think we're supposed to know in these 30-minute bite-sized clips, and you can't trust like 2/3 of what's being told. So is there both the space to be able to educate in ways that are different?
Yes.
In places that I trust.
Yes.
Which again isn't new. It's like it's the new school library, and it's all. And I always come back down to this. Is like when I think about our market, which is Flatbush Central. The reason why I got excited about the project, because it's a hard project. To your point, it never ends. You think it ends, there's just a new twist on it, right?
Yes.
But the idea of having a legacy space that people naturally trusted because they were going there from the time they were kids. Or they were going there because they were reminding them of home, in that case, whether it was Haiti or Jamaica, wherever they're coming from. It had all these different reasons to not exist, because market-wise, like, all right, a Caribbean marketplace in the middle of New York that, like, where it's cold half the year, like, how does that work? But the point of it was, it's a landing space for people to sort of get settled in Flatbush. And so it was going to always be more than just, like, a marketplace.
And say what Flatbush is.
So Flatbush is a neighborhood in Brooklyn that has been probably for the last 60 years, pretty much of all the different neighborhoods, because obviously New York is diverse, but probably of all the neighborhoods in New York, probably the central landing place for the Caribbean diaspora in New York City. And so by and large, if you were coming from one of the 29 islands from someplace, you probably landed in Flatbush, at least initially.
Okay.
And then you got sort of wherever you're going to go. So some people went to Queens, et cetera, but like Flatbush has been the epicenter for Caribbeanness in New York City for like, I'd say 60, 70 years. And this marketplace was a publicly run market that was mimicking some of the traditional marketplaces you would see in the Caribbean, and frankly, any place that's not the United States, right? Like the idea of small scale merchants selling their wares. And I think if you've been to most countries across the world, whether you're in Latin America, Africa, Caribbean, et cetera, you see some of the same things, same themes, right? And so you have sort of like the merchant selling the same thing as the guy next door to them. They're sort of haggling and hustling, trying to get you to buy their stuff, et cetera. So it's a very particular modality around purchasing, but imbued in that is the culture of the place. So you go, I guess if you want to buy a tchotchke or a Bible or, dried mushrooms, you can get all that stuff from us. But at the same time, you're buying back into the culture you're from. And if you're second or third gen, you're buying into your legacy, right? And so we're in this inflection point where the original vendors are getting older. We call them our entrepreneurs. We started out with 40 plus of them when we took the market over in 2017. We took the market over in 2017. We won the award to build the building in 2013. And so you talk about how long this project has been. We built the building.
Takes time to do all of this. And that's also when we started talking about doing something together and partnering to bring the rising tide model to support these entrepreneurs. Go on.
Trying to figure out how to your point, get them a baseline. Right? And what was interesting about this project and how it's evolved is it's gone from saying, okay, I'm preserving this Caribbean cultural marketplace to can this facility be a hub of innovation for Flatbush that frankly is durable. The founder of the market was the first Caribbean councilwoman for the district in the city of New York, Dr. Una Clark. And first thing she told me when I met her like 12 years ago is you are going to be a steward for this neighborhood. And I didn't quite know what that meant. But she's like, every group that's coming to the United States has figured out a way to create an institution that outlasts probably their own space here. So you look in Flatbush, you see the Dutch Reformed Church.
I see.
From 1648 or whatever it was, right? When the Dutch first got to New York, planted a flag, built a church.
And we're not talking about them in Flatbush anymore.
Yep, but that church is still the Dutch Reformed Church. And she's like, her point is that every community creates that durable institution. And when I was thinking about the idea of sort of taking over an institution to some extent, it's relatively young in its maturation, so it's going to need to evolve. What has to happen with that evolution? So first was the physical plan. So we dreamed up a different concept around what a marketplace could be. So we needed to keep the marketplace in place because that was the rule when we were negotiating with the city. But I was purposely like, look, this has to be something that's going to be more evolutionary in its construct around building entrepreneurship, thinking about opportunities around innovation and infrastructure for that purpose. So we have a food hall. We have 2 bars. We have what we call our tasting kitchen, which is like a place where you can do everything from a birthday party to a prototyping for your boozy ice cream to doing a video cast with the CEO of One Brooklyn Health. We have a big shared kitchen facility, so you could do your contract catering and your CPG product production, but you can also film all of it, right? And then behind that, you have a body care lab where you do all the same things, but your beauty and health and plant medicine, et cetera. And then we have our design and maker space. So you have the textile side and you have the AV side. So it was, again, in 2015, our version of everything we're talking about. We were talking earlier about technology shifting, but we knew the physical plant needed to be focused on that. Even as the actual equipment and methods evolve, we needed that space in the neighborhood, right? What's interesting about where we are now is the neighborhood has changed fundamentally. Flatbush it's still Caribbean, but it's also not. And what does it mean to think about diaspora, both in terms of like where you're coming from or where you've gone? So now there's a Flatbush Caribbean diaspora that's now being displaced and spreading out throughout the region, right? And going back to the point I was making about institution and touchstone, why do you come back? You think about the churches and other places of faith, they can bring you back home. And I think in a lot of places throughout the country, they're one of the reasons why you go back to the old neighborhood, right? Like you'll go back to the church, and even that's starting to fray a little bit, right? And so I'm getting to the digital part of this.
Well, before the digital part, so the displacement part. Do you think the now the building has affordable housing.
Yes.
So what were the broader dynamics that, or?
Let's dig into that.
Okay.
250.
Before we get to digital displacement, let's
the
physical
right.
displacement. Yes.
So 255 units of affordable housing,
Okay.
100% affordable.
Amazing.
So we'll get wonky for a second. 37% of AMI, which is very low income.
Yeah.
All the way up to 165% of AMI, which is basically like right at market rate for that neighborhood.
Okay.
Right. And so we had
Amazing.
a quarter at 37%, a quarter at 57%, a quarter at 97%, and a quarter at 165. So we wanted to create an intentional mixed income community. We didn't want to sort of concentrate sort of poverty in one place, but there's certainly enough units in place for folks who are really low income. We had 51,500 applications for 255 slots.
Wow.
And we weren't even like close to being the norm. Like we were sort of in the middle. I've seen buildings that have hundreds of thousands of applications.
That's extraordinary.
So when you think about the need, like the supply is not keeping up. So it's like, okay, and so for every unit that we're going to put up that's affordable, think about how long it took us to go through an entitlement process. So we had to spend 2 extra years just to get zoned appropriately, right? Yeah. Then we built during COVID, so things weren't as fast as we wanted it to be.
And more expensive.
And they were more expensive. And then you look around you, people who are building as of right, they're going to shoot up quickly, don't go through any of the process I'm talking about. They're not worried about the build, the construct, they're just trying to put units up. And so while they only have 255 at one point, you can get to 255 pretty quickly. You think about people taking advantage of where the economy is going and where the neighborhood's going. So that institution building becomes super important, because if we can't supply enough housing to keep people in the residence, and they do end up getting displaced, what keeps them within the sort of center of gravity, at least to show up again? And so we realized, like, all right, how do we sort of be that touchstone? And when I was going to the digital side of things, it's in the middle of COVID when I can't be near you.
Yes.
Right? Like how can I still keep you in my orbit without being near you? So one of those pivot points that sort of happened both for Urbane and for our property was what happens in 21 and 22 and even a little bit of 23, when it's a little like, all right, I got all these spaces where I'm supposed to convene you, but you're not comfortable quite yet, or you're not going to go to the nth degree and do that. And so whether I'm talking about purchasing omni-channel, so now I want you to buy on my website, and I want you to buy through our social channels, and I want you to buy in pop-up, and I want you to buy in our facility, and it's all these things. And I'm gonna bring it back to your data points, because when I think about the AI element of what we're talking about, place is a really fascinating place to capture data in a way that's way different than just individual phones, et cetera, because I can aggregate different data sets. And that's when we talk about like this idea of a neighborhood accelerator. Some of that's about the people and the enterprises that we can hopefully build in that, but the other part is we're accelerating the data as asset concept. So where I'm tooling on right now, and that's what I'm trying to frankly get both my team and others to understand, is when I think about a place like Flatbush, I have natural data points that come along with it. So business point data tied to the sales, right? I can see what you're doing in your till. I can see the foot traffic that comes through. I can see how and when you move through my space. Right? If I'm selling an ad, I can know what the ad rates are. I can see the eyeballs that are showing up in that space. But I can also, because of what we're talking about, get really interesting sentiment information and attitude and behavior information about not just why you're purchasing or why you're doing things, but if you trust the place. I can then stretch it out into almost anything. I can ask you any question. I can create any feedback loop I want to create around that data. And so the question that we're now posing is, okay, can this be the undergirding for that thin but deep data set, where I can ask you anything. I can teach the AI, hey, because I got X amount of people coming through my space, right? But also, if I'm building a community virtually, you're tapping in the other way. So you're on my website, you're on our socials, et cetera, et cetera. All those things are becoming part of the learning of the AI. Can the AI then create solutions for that group? Right? So I think that's the thing we're sort of scratching at a little bit. It's like, how do you think about a place like a Flatbush, or our sort of Gen 2 versions of what we're trying to do? How do those places become fonts of data and information? And then more importantly, the people who are generating the information, how do they own it? Right? And so when we talk about like where Urbane's going, where we're shifting in sort of V7, I guess, is really doubling down on the idea of community ownership and thinking about ways in which that shows up. And so some of that is the buildings themselves. So if these buildings are places where you can create entrepreneurship, enterprise, et cetera, awesome, right? But if they're also essentially data as asset concepts, and we're thinking about new asset accretion, I want community owning both the facility and the infrastructure that makes that happen, right?
Yeah.
That's the goalpost.
Yeah.
And then the last part is obviously the enterprises that shoot off of this stuff all need resourcing. So how can those folks tap in there and get the investment that we're talking about in place?
Yeah.
So
I want to jump in and ask a question there, because I think that is that begins to speak to vision, right? And in many ways, I think, especially when it comes to data, and we've focused rightly so, I think, on the bias in training data or data poor communities, and what it means that we just are not generating the kind of data that would train AI systems to have a more accurate, nuanced, deep picture of what communities that are underrepresented in data sets are about, what their needs are, and so on, especially if we start thinking about generating solutions or generating new ideas. So we're not just repeating past broken systems on some kind of an echo that keeps replicating the problems. So one of the things that sits with me is certainly in barely scratching the surface and thinking about how AI is shifting how capital is allocated, right? How investors are allocating and how much is getting automated, and algorithms at a speed that we can't comprehend are doing that work. And so there's a question to say, so what does this mean for the role of investors? Again, it brings us back to this question of role, which then gets us into agency and the structuring of roles to enable agency. And on the other side of it is that of entrepreneurs and their roles, and how we imagine how, whether it's new solutions, new ideas, et cetera, that could be generated from this data, it still needs to be absorbed, both trusted, seen, recognized, but then it needs to be absorbed by, let's say, the heart of an entrepreneur who's willing to be with it, with the problem, with the solutioning and the failing and the succeeding and the trying and the evolving. So what does that look like? And I feel like Matrix pictures are coming to mind of like
Zion. we're all underground. We're all underground.
The party,
Right.
yes, the party's out.
Right.
Or like multiple pills. No pills.
Right.
No pills for anybody. I'm kidding. But really, like, what does it look like to have this? And maybe we can even ask it in a vision question of 2040. Let's say it's working. Let's say the Mangrove, let's say our investor friends, funders, they've come together, they see it, they're helping us build this vision, and it's working. And so what does it look like? What are we walking through in Flatbush?
Well, funny enough, so I would say 2040, you're walking me out to the Rockaways on the beach.
Ooh.
So this is where like
This is personal vision?
yeah, well, the baton pass happens, right?
Okay, the baton pass happens.
So if
Yes.
Flatbush is our V1 sort of center of excellence hub that has these sort of like technology meets sort of community vision points, and I think, I think there's a lot that we could do at Flatbush, but we're sort of hamstrung by the nature of the existing design footprint, et cetera, right? We can sort of tool and tinker upstream.
Yeah.
But our portfolio has other projects where we can start from scratch and build a suit and with this new idea in mind.
Oh,
and so
okay.
so for me, it's how do we take sort of, to your point, the iterative lessons that we're going to have from Flatbush, and then find the place where we can sort of do the V2 that really is the true example we're talking about. Okay. But I will answer your Flatbush question quickly first. I think 2040, frankly, Urbane's not involved in Flatbush anymore. The community owns it. The community runs it. The community has enough resources and skill sets to sort of think about the data capture piece of it, to be able to own their own sort of place-based data set as part of what they're trying to do. And if they wanted to hire a firm, us or otherwise, to sort of like manage the space going forward, that's cool. But to your point around agency, like it really would be them. Like the struggle I've had for like the last decade is figuring out how to get this asset in the community's hands because of the nature of how it was structured. Like it was a city conveyance. By definition, it was already complicated because the city had certain rules around who could do what, et cetera, et cetera. And so a lot of it's been proving that there's a model that's worth, frankly, transferring to the community, try and de-risk it enough so that like I felt like I was comfortable enough to say, okay, we figured out the sort of the mix of issues. Let's go forward, and you guys can kind of run with it.
Yeah.
So by 2040, my hope would be that the community were their own stewards in this concept.
Okay.
I also think the opportunity point is in the V2. You've built the suit, everything I'm talking about, the physical infrastructure you would need to have a data center focused on what we're talking about, right? So you can not only capture the information, you can process it, aggregate it, do whatever you want. But I think the most important thing is you build a space that's big enough, both in terms of the individual hub space. So if it's going to be a place like a Flatbush where it's another center, right? But also have a district that is also tying in. So you could, the whole thing, you could live, work, and play in a construct where this is intentional.
Yeah.
And so we have a opportunity in the Rockaways where it's a 116 acre multi-master plan campus on the beach.
Wow.
And it's in a predominantly Black neighborhood that's been frankly disinvested in for a very long time.
Okay.
And it has, and what I'm really fascinated about is you're tying into, I think you mentioned earlier, like the bio element to everything we're talking about, because also our natural systems are changing and shifting and moving at the same time.
Yes.
And what got us excited about the opportunity to work there was we are in a space of climate adaptation now. Like we can't ignore the fact that our climate has changed. Like it already has changed. So how do you build community? How do you build infrastructure? How do you build housing? How do you build all the things in that new environment place if we're going to live near water for the next 100-something years?
Yes.
So if that vertical's happening, along with technology's all happening. So I see what we're doing is infrastructure building and investing. So remember I was talking about way back around when I was doing financing muni capital, that's where it shows up, right?
Yes.
So you're like, what are those things that are going to underpin a larger economic and social sort of infrastructure with the physical things you need for the 22nd century? So internet as utility, all these things that sort of just make sense within a climate construct. But most importantly, if you build that infrastructure, then layering, and you're intentional with it, layering in the people, the technologies I mentioned before, is like, how do I get technologists who care about what we're talking about to be in community with one another? Well, I don't know, if I build it near the beach and create cool space where you can again, because in the new economy, you don't have to live anywhere, right? If you're in that set of industries, you're actually already used to being a little bit transient as it is. So where can you build community in a place where people want to be? And so ideally what we're thinking about is, okay, if we can build intentional communities that are thinking about the stuff we're thinking about around data ownership, around thinking about, climate adaptation, building for these solution points, and particularly ones where there is a very traditional legacy vertical around, market fit, but there's also a very clear new social and maybe even political sort of infrastructure that needs to get built out. And the promise is you get to build it out. The last thing I'll say on this front is the entrepreneurs we're targeting. I mean, I've been so used to sort of the idea of preservation. So for Flatbush, it was about build this institution and make sure it's stable and solid for the elderpreneurs who put the work in to set it up.
Yeah.
And that was sort of the first version of it. And now we're in a place where it's like those folks are sunsetting. What's the baton pass? What's succession look like?
Absolutely.
And then how do you think about the integrated sort of model? Mixed income, mixed age, mixed modality, mixed technology, right? So for a Rockaway's project, I can think about all that from the start. Like I'm not trying to retrofit it anymore. It's like these are things that I'm trying to pull off. So when I'm trying to attract entrepreneurs, I'm frankly going after our kids, the 12-year-olds.
Yeah.
Because by the time I'm done building, they'll be 20.
Yes.
Right?
It'll be 2025, yeah.
And beyond that, they're not going to have to learn all the stuff we're talking about. It'll be naturally part of their own ethos. So the real wrestling match now is like, can I get someone super talented to want to build for a generative future, right? Versus just to build for themselves because they can make money or do whatever, right? To me, that's the real battle. But if I can create all the other condition points, like the really cool space, the infrastructure to be able to learn and do, to be able to see that you can see yourself in something, right?
Yeah.
That's my hope. Again, I think we can build Shangri-La. That'll mean people going to live there. But I think if we can at least set the conditions up for it, like that will be the ultimate goal in 2040.
Yeah.
To be able to say, oh wow, like you have this really interesting laboratory that's scaled.
Yes.
In that the current powers that be can still see the way they can make money. So fine, the real estate, this, that, and the other.
Yeah.
But beneath that, maybe as a sort of insurgency that's sort of emerging under their nose. You have this whole new thing that's going to be emergent, hopefully to take over, where data as asset is imbued in the physical plant that we build out, and it's imbued in the infrastructure that we sort of have in place, and it's imbued in the way we organize and attract people to show up at this place, right? That would be the goal for 2040.
I think that is a pretty exciting future. 2040 is looking pretty
15 years, man. That's crazy. It's not
15 years. It's not that far.
Yeah.
Now, here's the thing. So, Rising Tide has been now we'll turn 21 in like a matter of 2 weeks. And our bet has been that we need those community-based, place-based entrepreneurs who are essentially microcosms of culture. They're, we've used that terrapin, the turtle, right, that navigates water, that walks on land, as kind of our inspiration point. And the back of that shell, on the back of that terrapin, is kind of like what these entrepreneurs do with their businesses. Is they carry a purpose, they carry values, and there's a lot more that we can do using technology to actually imbue their activities in such a way that it can endure. Most importantly, that it can also be passed on, that the succession part, the magic and mystery and all of what goes into building an enterprise, it can't all be passed on, but some of the core elements can be transferred, that there is a values-based transfer as well as a technological and basic assets and material dimensions. Our vision has, at the same time, been very much focused on community, the word community itself, that individuals, our entrepreneurs are individuals, that is key. That is what they do, is they come up with ideas and they build them out and they endure of their own volition. But to build communities of individual entrepreneurs, and then to have community builders, true community builders and investors like you, who are thinking about a whole array of the ecosystems that would support these entrepreneurs as they're building community, as they're adding value, is a big part of what has excited us. And so, James, you're part of the Rising Tide Network. There are 18 entrepreneurs, organizations like yours around the country, rural, small town, big cities, that are building and adapting and seeing a 2040 vision for their own communities. And I've been very excited to bring this community of really practice and innovation together in this particular time so that we can share with each other what we're seeing, so we can learn and adapt together and be more resilient together. And I see a lot of the things that you shared, I think will be very inspiring for our other network partners in terms of like, how do we bring in real estate? How do we bring in technology? How do we tie it to the entrepreneurship that endures and actually bring it together with that long-term vision and the absolute critical infrastructure need of needing to pass it on to community? Because we can't be here unless something changes in the technology forever. Right. Although, don't get me started, there is a way, right? Part of this conversation will hopefully be there echoing out of the AI to enable folks to kind of listen in for how they might do it long after we're gone. But I wanted to just really offer my gratitude and excitement that you're in this work and that you do build with. That you don't build for communities, you build with. That's the thing that has always honored and inspired me, because not everybody can do that. It's so much easier to just think about, let me just do it for them and then move on. But you've been very committed to with for all the years that I've known you, and I think that's really powerful. And so my final question is going to really bring it to this with element. With it's not just James with community, it's James with beloved, a partner, a life partner, and James with two little kids. They're littler than mine, so this is so exciting for me to watch you move through this. And we, at the start of this conversation, we didn't share this with the audience, but we said we're doing this for our kids. This is our conversation for our young ones, that when they're 22, when they're, navigating this, that maybe there might be something here for them. So can you share a little bit about what it means to be doing this with the little ones in your life, with a family? And I know you're wearing a necklace, so I hope you could get to tell us about that necklace too. So yeah.
Yep, I have two little ones. My daughter is 2.5, Nora, and my son Jabron is 5 months. And so for a very long time, I mean, Urbane 17, and so it was my child, it was my baby, it was the thing that I sort of nurtured and sort of dealt with all the hiccups with, et cetera. And when I met my wife Yasmin, it's been a tension point. I mean, I think for many entrepreneurs trying to figure out how to like both decouple yourself from this thing you birthed, right? And at the same time, I think I heard in the last podcast, someone recognizing that business isn't just business. It's like everyone's, it is personal, right? Like everything in life is personal. So how do you sort of find a good balancing point for it? And I think kids do that for you, by and large, if you allow them to. And so my daughter's been really interesting because I've had her longer. I think the interesting moment for me has been sort of as she's emerged out of like babbling and crawling to like now she's exerting herself in my life and saying, okay, I need you to do X, Y, Z. The idea of work is really fascinating because she's like, oh, mommy goes to work, daddy goes to work. But I work from home part of the week and I'm out part of the week. And so there's certain cadences that get created. And so, I got this necklace at a farmer's market because she picked it out. And it's been interesting.
At a farmer's market.
Yeah. And so the idea was, I sort of gave to her, I said, look, this is our Black Power necklace. I'm like, I'm giving this to you. You're going to hold this down at home. You got the Black Power. And then I was, I'll come home. Sometimes she wears, sometimes she wasn't. She's 2.5, so whatever. But, I'd be like, where's my necklace? And so she'd give it back to me at home. And then one day she looked at me, she was like, well, why am I only wearing this here and you're only wearing it there? So she gave it to me, she said, you got to have the Black Power out. And I was like, all right, well, you're absolutely right. What a rocket.
It's like, this is Wakanda stuff that I'm giving you. What's going on?
Power, is that right? And, my wife hates this necklace because she thinks it's too gaudy. Not anything that, but just like, she looks at me, she's like, but I dig it only because like, in a way, it's weird because it forces some conversations that people don't want to have.
Yes.
Like going back to the alley cat thing, I'm like, let me scratch this a little bit in ways that like, are a little bit provocative. But you know what? I get a chance to think about my daughter every time I wear it. So I wanted to make sure I at least wore it today. But to your bigger point, I think I just get really excited about building things we're talking about because I'm like, for a long time, it was egotistical. I mean, I wanted to be right. I wanted to sort of like, I knew a certain thing could work. I started a company and I've been through all twists and turns and, end of the day, it was egoistical to some extent to say, okay, I proved that my model was right. I proved that my idea was right. Now I don't care about that. I think the thing we're trying to build, whatever swings we take, whether I hit them or not, it's worth it because my daughter and my son and my wife and everyone else I care about, if they can live in that 2040 we just talked about, like if that could even 1/100th of the way get to where we're talking about, like I think that outcome is worth it. And probably more importantly, like, at that point, that I'm going to age myself here, but 15 years, I'll be 60. Like, it's a good time to sort of like whatever times I'm going to pass, to have that be an outcome point that I'm passing to just gives me a lot of energy and a lot of hope. So, and I hope that I'm leaving something to them that like they get, and and that's the kind of society, it's the kind of relationship, it's the kind of infrastructure that I want them to sort of stand on. So that's really where I get excited about the work going forward. It's much different than it used to be. But I'm excited for them.
Well, let me just say, my mom just turned 65 just a couple of weeks ago, and she started a new business. So my sense is that I don't think 60 for us, I mean, we could be starting multiple businesses, particularly with AI. Ha ha ha.
This is very true.
So I think you'll still be doing what you're doing and rocking the way you have. I'm wondering as we kind of come to a wrap here, and it can't really be a wrap because I mean, like I have dozens more of questions for you, but rapid fire in my mind, just to recap, because we covered a lot of territory. And I know we do that a lot when we get together. We'll get together for this 1 minute, conversation, and it's like, boom. And that's part of what I appreciate, because I think we do need more opportunities to think together. It's okay to think together and for each other, and it's okay for us not to know the answers and relish that. And I think that is a big part of why I'm doing this podcast. So for those who are like, give me the headlines of what Unc James wants me to to take away. And so let's pretend like my Noah, who's 12 now, is like listening to this a decade from now. Ha. And your Gibran?
Yeah, Gibran.
Gibran. And he's, thinking about this and listening to this. What's your rapid fire you want them to take away?
I think the biggest thing is that the idea of you being the steward of an institution could come alive in a really interesting and different way than we've ever seen before, because technology meeting, frankly, heart and soul is the opportunity point right now. And so hopefully what I've done for you guys is give you the opportunity to sort of lay into that and do whatever the hell you want to do, right? And hopefully we taught you right and wrong, good and bad, and all things, so that you're not destroying the earth or destroying a community, but you're actually generating and being, and a value add to that. But really it's giving you the thing I never had. That's that stable level of neighborhood sort of infrastructure and possibility and opportunity to do whatever the hell you want to do. Like that's where all this comes from. It's going back to the point I made very early on, like not having to go to New Hampshire to figure all this out, right? You can do it in your neighborhood, you can do it in Flatbush, you can do it in the Rockaway, you can do it wherever the hell you want to do it. That's what I'm trying to give you. And so beyond that, take it and run. That's really what I hope. And obviously, take it and run and don't kill anybody or do anything crazy, right? Because
the basics.
The basics, but you have the ability to run with it. And so I think in terms of the work, it is a sort of hopefully fully automated luxury community building, right? I'll steal that guy's frame.
I have one more for the kids, especially as I fully inhabit my kid mode at the moment. I would imagine they would probably want to know, you've traveled the world, you've been to places like Japan, Italy, all over. You've worked with all kinds of people. I'm sure our kids, our sons in particular, will say, how did you not, there is community and where you've been birthed and or where communities you're familiar and comfortable, and especially in a world that is transforming in ways that make it, that hanker back to ways of being with identity that is not helpful, is not evolving, and then there are things that will probably be hopefully shifting in the positive. So what, from a personal standpoint, what would you tell them about how to relate to the borders of the individuals they encounter that come from places of difference?
That's a great question. I think it's funny. I grew up in the 80s and 90s, where I think the idea of diversity was something that was popular is the wrong word, but like the aspiration in general was never like an individualist version of diversity. It was like the colors of Benetton. You all come together, and it's like everyone looks different, and by that you have a power in that. And I feel like we're in that mode where like everything's repeating itself a little bit. So like the individualism of the 80s is now giving way to sort of this collectivism of the 90s in that current context, and so the fashion looks the same, et cetera, et cetera. I think about our kids, and it's like, all right, like, can you find your tribe, your people, right? And I think the difference now, like we're talking about earlier, like you're finding your tribe on Roblox and all these sort of like digital tools and digital games, et cetera, et cetera. And my hope is that there's still room for like I play with you out in the backyard, on the stoop, in the street, and sort of build community that way too. That you can do both. Like there's an emergent universe where you can do it virtually, and that's cool. And you can come together and meet people in place and connect the dots on that way. And I hope that our kids are able to sort of find those folks and find that tribe and find that community in that way. That feels very ancient at this point, but it's super important. And my hope is that like the work that we're doing gives them a platform to sort of still walk into places, whether they're real or imagined, and sort of build out that that community that they can find themselves in. I think the other side of it is like for there to be enough stories that are sort of captured that they can see themselves in these realities that, you know, may be hard to navigate right now.
Yeah.
So, you know, with all the bluster that we were talking about before, like if you're learning in 30-second memes, somewhere in all the noise is the right kind of story to sort of guide them to a good path. And I hope that like what you're doing, frankly, is a support in that they can go into the time capsule, or, you know, they could see somebody like, oh, that's kind of cool. I want to learn more about it. And then they can go to Flatbush, they can go to the Rockaways and see the actual thing occur, right? So my hope is that we can build both realities. I mean, I'm not. Yeah, I mean, like, there's no universe where the digital is not going to play a role. It is, but can we create a better digital reality, and hopefully not lose the physical one that we need. Right?
Yeah, because the physical one is not like optional. We don't want to be like the batteries and, you know.
Exactly.
Yeah, so we got to build the other one. That's all those stories, the Matrix, all the stories that we see. I mean, like right now we've got so many, lots that are dystopian. But at the end of the day, the whole thing is like the physical, the relational. We shouldn't make that the optional. That this is, So we'll slow down. We'll have these conversations. I hope you come back again, and we could do this and do a part 2. I hope the vision becomes a reality. I'm so excited. Thank you for being in relationship, in the work with us, and here is to doing it in many more places with many more entrepreneurs together. So thank you. I appreciate you.
Always a pleasure.
Yay! We did it.
Yes.
We did it.
All right.
A long-awaited conversation.
Awesome.
Amazing. All right.
Thank you for tuning in to part 2 of our Future Tide conversation with James Johnson-Piett. We hope that the conclusion of this discussion left you feeling inspired by the possibility of community-driven change amidst immense technological shifts. If James's story inspired and moved you, please share this episode and consider learning more about his work at thisisurbane.com. Future Tide Conversations is an initiative of Future Tide Partners powered by Rising Tide Capital, a nonprofit organization dedicated to supporting entrepreneurs and leaders building community-level solutions for 21 years and counting. This work and our podcast are made possible by supporters like you. If you've enjoyed this 2-part episode, please consider leaving a review or even becoming a supporter of our mission at risingtidecapital.org. Until next time, thank you for being a part of this conversation and our community. We extend a special thanks to our executive producer, Chris Van Nest, for his expert editing, and our creative director, Tigist Kelkai, for the powerful visuals that accompany our stories. Let's continue to invest in each other. Much like a rising tide, we rise together.